Hello and welcome back to Inquisitor Martyr. Last time we were doing more of the ecru Void Crusade, and we'll just keep going with that since we should probably get that done. Alright, so I found a map online that says where you're supposed to go, and you're supposed to follow like this top row for a good while, and it's not gonna give me a difficulty spike, so we'll just keep running these. Ugh. That damage, I'm already not a fan. We'll figure it out.
Electrospectral scans have revealed that the Xenox artifact is nearby, but it is protected. You must access the cogitators to gain access. May the Omnisar guide your hand.
I had said it before, but I will say it again. I am kind of bummed by the fact that, especially when it comes to Void Crusades, there is essentially a prescribed path to take for the least amount of difficulty. I think it really just takes away from the fun. You know, these should be more of exploring and just kind of experiencing stuff over, like, oh, you need to min-max. Like, I'm following the advice of it to a degree right now, having seen it, but I also would have taken this route anyways because it doesn't add difficulty. I just feel like instead of just flat, oh, it's now more difficult, they could have went in a different direction and said, you know, oh, well, now there's going to be another modifier on enemies. You know, you can have level increases, but they shouldn't be the only thing that changes. I'd rather see stuff that's like, oh, well, now all, you know, one could just randomly be like, whenever an enemy dies, there's a 25% chance of spawning a demon. Okay. Does it suck? Kinda. Is it manageable? Very. But it is a modifier. And, you know, it's gonna stack up with other modifiers and create a challenge. And it becomes something more of, hey, how do I adapt to the situation, as opposed to, hey, how do I not get one shot? You know, that's always been something I find a little bothersome, is this game doesn't have, and it shouldn't have to copy Diablo word for word, bar for bar. That's I'm trying to think. It's not bad to copy, because, you know, if someone does the right thing, you should probably just do the right thing instead of trying to be different. But at the same time, those things that worked, that Diablo did, worked for a reason, you know. Difficulty levels. Oh, I want to play hard, I want to play master, I want to play Torment 3. Yeah, I could go in, fresh character, nothing, go into Torment 10, get one-tapped by a spitting zombie, or maybe I have a ton of Paragon points that I dump into damage, or I dump into something that lets me survive the fight a little longer. Maybe I'm better geared. And I mean, that's another matter. You know, even the Torment levels weren't that great, simply because it was just health and damage upgrades. Oh, they're tankier, so get better gear. Oh, they're more dangerous. Get more armor, get more health, get more lifesteal or HP per second. Even Diablo could have used a more interesting modifier. You know, all undead enemies now have a 10% chance on death to reanimate. Okay, that makes fighting undead more interesting. You know, you could do it for, oh, demons have this. Like, I can't remember the, like, beastmen kind of dudes, but they could have something. And then, you know, Torment 2 might be health and damage. Torment 3 might be another trait up. Torment 4 might be another health thing. You know, you stagger it out, because I think you could create, one, you could actually get away with making more levels then, and then two, it would work. because then you're just adding modifiers. And you could argue, well, some of those modifiers could potentially be things that, you know, your rare and epic enemies already have, but, I mean, none of the ones I just mentioned were traits that they have. It's not like it's that hard to come up with new traits. You know, there's a lot that could be done. And it can be applied to this game, too. I saw a thing talking about MMOs and people talking about, like, how risky it is to criticize them, because there's so many diehard fans. And that's something I've always thought about with any game, really, is there's always diehard people who do not take criticism. I said it, I think, last time. Developers sometimes don't take it very well. I remember, actually recently, Legend of Total War got dropped from the creator program for Total War by Creative Assembly. And part of it was he was critical of the game. He would point out, you know, hey, there's all these exploits, there's all these problems, and somebody didn't take it well. You know, you gotta take criticism. I take it. You know, some people say, oh, your video sucked. It's like, okay, not really useful. Early on, I had people who were like, hey, you should do something with your audio and kind of fix it. Maybe do some editing before you put it all together. I flat out said, okay, do you have a suggestion for a program? They said Audacity. I said, cool. Started doing that. You know, I took the criticism to heart because it was useful and it was conducive to something good. But yeah, I don't know. I have problems with how a lot of ARPGs kind of run into those problems now. Is scaling. They're better at avoiding power creep, but their scaling is just damage and health. And then that's all that really matters with the gear. Oh, does this give me more damage? But I guess, in a way, I can see a way around it. Because what I'm thinking, I was going to say is, well, how would you make an ARPG that doesn't have that really big, like, focus on gear? And I thought, literally as I'm saying it, I realized, well, Souls games, you know, you can make it through with the starting gear if you really want to, because it's a mix of skill, and there's a bit of upgrades, and there's a degree of, you know, understanding, hey, this is just how it is. And then what they did in Bloodborne especially was chalice dungeons. Oh, you want to socket blood gems. Well, this has a circle, and like a triangle. I can't remember the exact ones. I haven't touched Bloodborne in years. But they have slots. And then certain blood gems fit into certain slots. They give you, you know, 3% extra damage against beasts, or, you know, extra arcane damage or something like that. And I think that's great, because it provides a tangible thing. You know, oh, you can upgrade it. It's still within, you know, acceptable means of damage. And you can find multiple variations, and especially, like, now you look at, like, Elden Ring and stuff, you could get away with giving weapons innate damage types, and with their armor system, with the debuffs and build-up and stuff, you can get away with a lot more debuff types and make it interesting. You know, you can have Frostbite, you could have, like, Killing Cold. Terrible name, but I'm just spitballing here. That's Frostbite, but it's reduced effect, but it also deals damage over time. You could have, you know, your lethal poison that they have that they don't identify as anything different from normal poison, which doesn't help at all. But you have your lethal poison, which deals faster damage, but over less time. So you actually deal like 2/3 the damage. But you can burn through it faster to reapply it. But you could have, you know, a numbing poison that reduces stamina regen. You could do a bunch of different things, and it all falls within the framework. You know, there's ways you can make games, you know, a bit better. And I really think devs should really start looking at the Souls games a bit more, and instead of just looking at like, oh, clearly the thing to take away is the combat or the high difficulty. It's like, no, you can actually take away other mechanics and apply them elsewhere. You know, outside of like a fast-paced shooter like COD, where nothing's really gonna be beneficial for you, most games can learn something. It all just boils down to, you know, what do you learn?
The terminals operating
Hey, I gotta go find the door. Like the button.
Another way, Inquisitor.
Thought that was a little too easy. I was like, this is just kind of a walk-in, walk-out deal, but no. Yeah, Gamescom, that happened. They announced Dead Island 2 finally. I'm excited for that. I like Dead Island 1 a lot. I was going to actually do a playthrough of Dying Light on the channel, but I just never got around to it. I had already beaten it, so I wasn't too invested at that point. And honestly, as good as Dying Light is, it was a little too just kind of like grim, and on top of all that, it was essentially stripped down Dead Island, which I wasn't a fan of. Like, oh hey, we got rid of, like, the zombies die faster, but we got rid of all the fun stuff, like being able to cut off a zombie's arms or break their arms, and have them just like chase you down as a head, or like just trying to bite you with their head. You know, little fun stuff like that I found enjoyable. Dumping all of that and just being like, oh, it's free running, that's the big thing. It's like, okay, parkour's cool, I guess. But it felt like they just stripped too much out of the game. I am a little worried though, because it is Dambuster Studios and they don't have a good track record. But that said, just because they've had a bad track record in the past doesn't mean they can't do a good job now. And I mean, they're under Embracer, and outside of Saints Row, oh god, Saints Row, Embracer's been doing pretty good. So I'm hoping for the best. They openly said they've had 4 years to work on this game. Realistically, they don't have to make many changes from Dead Island 1. I do wonder what they're doing though, because they're like, oh, there's 8 characters, and I'm like, well, the previous game and Riptide, it was a standalone, so it's not a sequel. But those two had, you know, 4 classes: blade, blunt, like hand-to-hand, and gun. So it makes me think they're not going to do classes, and it's just more of a character, and then you spec into whatever you want, which is fine. I think that's probably for the best. It just kind of wish they had flat out said, like, yeah, they're just characters, so pick one that you think sounds cool over, like, you know, I hope you enjoy hearing this character the whole time because you wanted to be, you know, the melee guy. Admittedly, like, I played everybody except the gun person in Dead Island, and I liked, like, Sam B as the hand-to-hand. I thought he was funny. I'll never get over that. But yeah, hoping for the best there. We need good games coming out. Nothing from Sony, because they're doing that whole, like, state-of-play thing. Which, I mean, it's whatever. But they really gotta step it up. If you haven't seen the news, they're hiking the price on PS5s everywhere except the US. Which, one, thankfully I got my PS5 already. Two, I get it, there's a chip shortage, and, you know, supply issues, and everything is still screwy. But man, that is gonna be rough. I mean, they've already got bad press. And then they have this going on. And being a more expensive system is what really kneecapped the PS3 back in the day. Granted, that also made them take risks. So I'm hoping that while we will probably get the bad side of things, we might also get the upside of, hey, Sony might actually take a risk for once in their past, decade. I mean, the stuff with Activision still has them pretty agitated. Saudi Arabia signed off on the merger. I mean, it's only one of like 20 countries that have to sign off on it, but countries tend to kind of follow suit. If it's like, oh, look, these guys are cool with it, they must not see an issue. If someone else sees an issue, they're gonna start second guessing it, like, do we really have a problem with this, or, what's the deal? Because, I mean, Sony's sitting down being like, yeah, we don't need exclusive shooters, that's what the third-party market is for. It's like, no, don't do that. You had good stuff back in the day. But they're dead set on games that are going to be played once, if that, and then abandoned, like God of War. I know people are like, oh, it's so great. I'm like, yeah, but how many people are really doing New Game Plus? Or Spider-Man, or The Last of Us. They're a one-and-done deal. Ghost of Tsushima, great game. But it's still a one-and-done deal. You need to have things that keep people. Something like SOCOM or MAG. Those would really help. But they're set in their ways of doing whatever. It's not even including the bad press they've gotten over the past few years for censorship. Games that may not be my taste, but they censor them, and it's like, well, why? I always think of the one where, I can't remember what it is. Someone where you end up like cutting someone's face off and putting it on your face. And they're like, oh, we can't have this, get rid of this. And I'm like, but, that's what the M rating is for. It's mature content. If little Jimmy, when he's 8 years old, sees it, that's on him, that's on his parents. If they can't monitor what they're buying or letting the kid buy and he plays that, that's on him. You can't sit here and be like, oh no, adults can't play the M-rated games. It's too graphic for them. It's like, come on, we're adults, we can handle things. It is just very strange to me. God, he had a really long death animation. I never noticed that. Like, the warlock sits there and, like, drops to his knees and he's like, oh, I'm dying. Like, hurry it up, dude. We got places to be. I was about to say that. This is a really long time, because it took a second while I'm holding interact, just like, we don't need to, move with any urgency. Man, I can't wait for it to just be a interact and then stay in an area for stuff like this. Still no word on an update though. I'm really thinking it's gonna be probably 2023 before we get the Sororitas DLC. I hate to say it, but it's like I have no information. You can check the forums and they're just like, oh yeah, we said it's coming out, that's all. Cool, thanks for the updates, guys. You know, I love being kept in the loop. And if it's a matter of like, oh, well, especially for consoles, like, oh, we're not getting money, it's like, then release the updated version of the game. You know, that might get people to buy the game if there's a updated version. And even then, that might not help considering the difficulty of getting PS5s. Yay.
Transfer complete. Initiating noospheric data entombment. Mission is successful. End of log.
Ah, so we get a +1 no matter where we go. Well, we might as well go here, because then we can hopefully knock out into these. We can go down and up. I guess I'm not too worried about the level up, if we're being real. Wow, that's actually really good for T-Bolt. Almost 300% damage against elites, villains, and bosses. Still, not that great. Berserk tokens, don't use them. See, I still don't like those explode on kill. I cannot bring myself to use them. But yeah, I'm not worried as much, because if I level up, then the difficulty will still stay at 70, or it'll go to 71. But
Electrospectral scanning revealed
it's another
assets of the highest importance.
destroy stuff. Okay. These sabotages aren't that bad. Unfortunately, I can't just sprint through it, because as much as I thought about it for a moment, I'm like, could I just run and get all these? If it's anything like that one time I tried doing it with the, what was it? The Panic Room. The Panic Room mission with all of the Tyranids, and I just got flattened and the subject I had to rescue died. Like, nah, I guess I can't really do it. Know what else would be cool for this kind of mode? Ways that you could reduce difficulty. You know, you could get an item from, like, the one merchant Rebus. You never see him, but he's the guy who sells, like, some cosmetics and some consumable items and stuff. He shows up every once in a while. It'd be cool if you could get something that's like, oh, hey, we'll knock out a level or 2 or 3 from your current Void Crusade. You know, it costs you, so you have to weigh it and be like, okay, do I really need to do a reset here, or am I good? And the argument can be made, well, then people are just going to buy a bunch of those and use them when they do Void Crusades. And it's like, yeah, that's fine, though. If you have to farm, the Cortex fragments to get the stuff to buy them, you're still playing the game. You're not just sitting here being like, oh, well, I'm passively just getting Caligari credits and I'm buying these. Stuff like that I would understand having a problem with. But if you're still having to farm, I don't see as much an issue. And also it gives some extra value to the stuff, because otherwise, like, I can buy an item that lets me bring, like, an Imperial Guardsman or a Space Marine on a mission or some Eldar, and I'm sitting there thinking, when am I actually going to use this? Like, those Guardsmen die real fast. You know, one lingering AoE and those dudes just go splat. So I can't really look at this and be like, ah, yes, this is a great purchase. But something that makes my whole Void Crusade a little easier, that's got value. You know, I'll spend the time hunting down stuff to get that. I think there's, you know, stuff to be gained. Please leave me alone. Alright, I was going to mention something else too quick. Yeah, that's what it is. I had to find a quick, I believe it's... Yeah, it's Eddie Ram. He had commented on one of my videos from, I believe, last week? It was the asking, like, what even is ecru? And he had responded and figured I'd share since it is nice to know what it is. Ecru is essentially like a, as you can tell through some of the pictures and stuff, and I actually color tweak the thumbnail to kind of be in the same vein. I couldn't get it exact, but it's like a cream color, and what it is specifically is it's French for unbleached, and it's supposed to be like unbleached bone. Which I thought was really interesting and makes actually a ton of sense once you look at the color, think, you know, what does an unbleached human bone look like? And you're like, oh, okay. How do I know what an unbleached human bone looks like? I honestly was... In college, I contemplated becoming a forensic scientist. That or anthropologist, so I took a number of classes that ended up seeing bones and dead bodies. You see them, you're like, oh, that's neat. And I mean, you even see them in some instances with, like, if you've ever seen anything about a corpse farm, fascinating places. Definitely not somewhere you go on a date. But a corpse farm, typically, what it is it's a location where when people donate their bodies to science, sometimes they'll be placed in various locations and situations so that coroners and other students who have to work with the dead can understand decay. You know, a body might be placed in a car, they might be placed under a tarp in a field, they might be exposed just flat out to nature, placed in water. Because all these different things have an effect on how someone's body decays or may be preserved. And I thought it was fascinating. Because it's something you don't think about. You know, people tend to think a body just kind of, when it's dead, it's dead. You know, it doesn't really change, everything kind of decays the same, but it doesn't. Or there's other interesting things like, God, I can't remember the proper term, but people call it like tomb wax. And what it is like fat and all this stuff that kind of congeals into this like pale, it can be like very fleshy colored or it's very black colored sludge found in a number of catacombs. It's really interesting. Disgusting, but interesting. It's like sometime I'd love to go to the catacombs in France. Admittedly, most of it's like blocked off, and in some parts it's understandable. I've watched a number of people actually who've gone through, and they've talked about like, yeah, there will be holes to floors that are completely flooded. So people just can't get down there. And I'm sure people have died trying to go down there, you know. I bet there's a number of missing persons cases that could easily be solved with a trip through some of those areas. But I just think it's all very fascinating. You know, someone really sat down and was like, okay, we have all these graveyards and we need to move them. Where do we put them? And someone was just like, yeah, let's just start building a giant catacomb under the city. And it's also kind of sad, because there are areas where people will, like in videos, they're walking through, and it looks like it's like dirt or sand. Then they look a little closer, and it's just crushed and powdered bones. You know, all these femurs and other parts that have just been subjected to decay and have just been trampled on for so many years that they're just dust. And it's kind of sad. You know, you want to see people's bodies being respected in death. While at the same time, there's also kind of this understanding of like, look, they're dead. You know, at a certain point, they're going to decay into nothing anyways. But, you know, you still hope that until they become literally nothing, they'd get some respect. And a lot of times people do, but sometimes people get weird. You know, you always get those weirdos who are like, I'm going to take a skull, and it's like, maybe you shouldn't. You know, wild thought here. Leave the bodies where they are. You know, you wouldn't be happy if someone went through a graveyard and scooped up part of, you know, your grandma and was like, oh, I'm going to take this home and put it on my shelf. No, that's messed up. Which actually, it does lead to a question a lot of anthropologists kind of have to reckon with. And it's the question of, at what point do you go from grave robbing to archaeological, you know, preservation and dig site? And it ranges, some people say 150 years, some say a little longer. But it is a kind of weird thing, you know, having to reckon with it is effectively grave robbing. You know, it's just with an academic lean to it most of the time. I have to say most of the time, because people literally do tomb rob. That's actually a really big problem in Egypt. That's why a lot of, like, the Valley of the Kings and places like that, a lot of the known sites have, like, welded gates in front of them, because people would just go in and pocket stuff. Which is just really irritating to me. It's like, come on, dude, just don't steal stuff. Simple as that. Don't rob the ancient, like, vizier or pharaoh's tomb. Like, even ignoring people's superstitious beliefs, you just don't do it. Oh, and actually, just thinking of, like, ancient sites, I just remembered, like, all the stuff with the droughts going on. People are finding all sorts of wild stuff. Throughout Europe, they're finding World War II German, like, boats full of munitions. In Texas, they found, like, one riverbed dried up enough that they found 119 million year old footprints of dinosaurs, which is so cool. There was, what else was there? Lake Mead in Nevada. Yeah, that's in Nevada. Is it? Because it's by Hoover Dam. Whoa, nearly dead. But, they're finding, like, sunken boats and bodies and all this stuff. There was somewhere in, I think, Italy, I want to say it was Italy, they found a, like, part of a Roman city that had been submerged underwater, and the lake receded enough and they found the ruins. They're finding this stuff all over, and I think it's fascinating. You know, all this history that we haven't seen in centuries, millennia, in the case of those footprints, over 100 million years. But now comes the problem of, how do you manage this stuff? How do you deal with it? How do you get it out? You know, because you kind of have to get this stuff moving. If you don't dig it up and excavate it or properly put barriers in, it's just going to get reflooded eventually. And these things will be lost to time. And that, of course, raises the other question of, at what point do you just let go? You know, what point do you say, look, we can't, we'd have to divert so much water around this. We would have to put so much effort to preserve this site that you just say, screw it, you know, get a bunch of 3D scans so we have them, and dump it. Let the water reclaim what it once belonged to. And there are instances where, you know, actually letting it be in the water preserves it. There are some sites along the Yangtze River, after the Three Gorges Dam was built, entire cities that were flooded. Some quite old. And there's kind of the question of, do you let it? Because it can be preserved, but the water quality and what's in it could also destroy it as well. Things like paper, things that might rot. You know, some things just aren't going to preserve, and those can be important. Now, there's a lot of questions with when should things be preserved and how should they be preserved. I mean, we've come a long way. There's ways now that we can take, like, charred scrolls and actually use lasers to read what was written on them. Which we couldn't have imagined that 30 years ago, 40 years ago. That'd be insane. Those items would be, you know, just put on a shelf in a box and said, you know, they're burned, we don't know. But now we have the tech to do quite a bit more. There's a lot of places we still haven't dug up. I mean, Central America, there's so many, you know, this is being very generic, but Aztec and Mayan cities. I know there's a lot of other groups, but it's easier for comprehension just to label it as one of the two. But there's so many cities just completely covered by rainforest. You know, we've used ground-penetrating radar and found them, but getting people there, getting an excavation, it would take decades, honestly. And you have to be careful, because you can't just rip out a tree, because the roots might be heavily entwined in roads or structures and could cause immeasurable damage. Hey, we got a level. Okay. Thanks for 2 challenges. Still gonna be more difficult. I don't like that. But I can take out that bonus mission, so we'll do that next time. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit the like button. It helps out the channel a lot. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.